Welcome to the fourth annual State of Story Grid address. It's November 9th, and this is the fourth time that I've started doing the State of Story Grid addresses. And so I just really appreciate you being here and being a part of this. I've been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this particular one for a year. So there were already things we were working on last year that we weren't ready to talk about yet. And now we are. And so I'm just excited to be here with you. And I just want to thank you for being here with me. And as you know, here at StoryGrid, we are dedicated to helping you level up your craft as a writer. That's what we're always thinking about, what we're always shooting towards. And so I started doing this State of StoryGrid address 4 years ago. It kind of started as kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. But the real reason is because we have a community here at StoryGrid, and we want to make sure you always know what we're working on. So we can always talk about what we've been working on, what we've done up until now, and then look forward into what we're going to do in the coming year as well. And so, this is the fact that I get to be a part of StoryGrid. All started with the fact that people actually showed up and listened to the podcast. And so I just feel a constant debt of gratitude to all of you for being a part of what we do here at StoryGrid. As you know, my name is Tim Grahl. I am the CEO of StoryGrid. I'm also the host of the podcast. Along with me is Danielle Kiowski, the Chief Academic Officer of StoryGrid University, and she will be hearing from her in a little bit. Along with us, we have Leslie Watts, the Editor-in-Chief of StoryGrid Publishing, and of course, Sean Coyne, the creator and founder of StoryGrid. And so we've been working really hard for a while now, and we're excited to talk about what we're working on in the coming year. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to start by just traveling back in time a little bit. So let's go all the way back to the year 1991. So this is when Sean Coyne got his very first job at a major publishing house as an editorial assistant back in 1991. And he had this idea that he would get this job at a major publisher and as an editorial assistant, and they would start teaching him how to systematically figure out which books work, which books don't, how to develop books and get them ready. And he assumed they would have this systematic way of doing it. And what he found was they didn't have that at all. It was all kind of intuition, seat of the pants, not really sure, not really any kind of method to it. And it seemed really, really random. And he didn't want his career to be random. And so he started working on a system that he could use to evaluate and level up writing. And so over the years, he had a lot of success as he started working in publishing. So just 5 years after he started, he was promoted to a senior editor, and he launched, he was given a brand new fiction imprint to run. And then he went on to hold positions at Dell Publishing, St. Martin's Press, Doubleday Publishing, and he founded an independent house called Rugged Land that was distributed by Macmillan and Random House. And at Rugged Land, in 6 years, he published 50 titles, and a third of them hit the major bestseller list. And then, of course, he started Black Irish Books in 2011, where he's published over 25 titles, including The War of Art and Turning Pro. And then back in 2015, that little system he had started developing as he was learning how to edit, he developed into a full system that he published as the Story Grid: What Good Editors Know in 2015. So he wrote and published that book, and that is when StoryGrid really got started. Now, a little bit about me. I've actually been in publishing since 2009. I started working on a book launch campaign. I got hired to run a book launch campaign and help a guy named Ramit Sethi launch his very first book. And I didn't know anything about the book world, didn't know anything about publishing. And that book came out and hit the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller list. And that really just got me hooked. And so I kept working with authors and launched dozens of books to the bestseller list, and got to work with a lot of major publishers, a lot of major writers as well. But all along the way, I secretly was working on fiction. I've always been a big reader. I've always loved books. When I was a kid, my parents were really strict about the TV and movies and music that I could consume, but they kind of let me read whatever I wanted. And so I would get new books anytime I would get my hands on them, and was reading adult books way before I should be reading them. I remember one time I read Jurassic Park when I was really young, and I started having nightmares that dinosaurs were like chasing me, but I didn't tell my parents about them because I didn't want them to take my books away. But I've always loved reading, and so I kept trying to write fiction over the years. But the problem is that everything that I was writing was crap. It was not very good, and it's bad when you can tell it's not good, right? Because sometimes we think our writing's good, and then we show it to somebody, and they give us different feedback than that. And so I kept trying to find something, just anything that would explain how writing fiction worked, how creating a story worked. And of course, there's lots of resources out there, and I was consuming them as fast as I could, but they just, some of them would help a little bit, but none of them really was what I was looking for, until I got my hands on the story grid. Now, of course, I bought the story grid, and it's funny, I tell this story sometimes, and so many people are like, that's the same thing I did, which is I get this giant 8.5 by 11 textbook in the mail, and immediately intimidated by the whole thing, and just stick it on the bookshelf and think I'll get to it later. So in that space of time, I ended up moving to Nashville, and once I was here for about a month or two, I was like, okay, I really want to do this fiction thing. Let me try again. And so I went and pulled down my copy of the story grid. I started reading through it. I'm like, this is what I've been looking for. And I just loved it. I still have my original copy of it with all the like tabs and notes and highlights and everything in it. And so what I did is I reached out to Sean, and I asked if I could get some time on the phone with him, and he was gracious enough to do it. And what was funny is, like, whenever I would try to get on the phone with somebody important, I would ask for, I think I only asked for 30 minutes of Sean's time. And my goal was to let him off the phone after 25 minutes, right? Because that way I'm respecting his time. And I had a little post-it note. I was sitting up in the bedroom, had a little post-it note, and I had written 4 questions on it. And I was like, I'm going to ask him these 4 questions, and then we're going to get off the phone. And so I asked him the first question, and 45 minutes later, he was still talking and answering that question. And so I was feeling awful, because I'm like, man, I want to respect his time. So I was like, hey, is there, maybe there's something we could do together. Is there any way I can help you? And by the end of that phone call, we decided to start the Story Grid podcast. And so in October 2015, we launched the first podcast episode, and started putting out episodes on a regular basis. I think we've released 283 of them now. And so that's how Sean got started in publishing and then putting out the Story Grid, and then that's how I came to Story Grid, and we started the podcast. And as many of you probably know, we spent several years working together on that podcast. And over those 3 years, I published 3 books: Running Down a Dream, my first novel, The Threshing, and the second edition of a book I'd written before, titled Your First 1,000 Copies. And so I did it, right? That's what I set out to do. I really wanted to write fiction, and I published my very first fiction. And, that's amazing. But there was a problem. And the problem was, all of my writing required extensive line-by-line editing. If you had seen the draft that Sean had sent back to me of basically every, the Running Down a Dream and The Threshing, he had heavily edited the line-by-line editing. And so that's not great, but that's okay. I kept moving forward. And so the next step was write book 2 of the Threshing series. So I got started, and you may have heard some of this on the podcast, but I started working on the draft, and I finished it. I wrote draft one. Yay! Right? That's amazing. I wrote a draft, and then Sean threw it away. So he read through it and realized like it needed a huge amount of work. And so we did this thing called the incubator, where we spent a week editing it. And I had to do a complete rewrite. So I got started on that. And around that time, Sean had started this pursuit to develop the first ever complete narrative theory. So everybody that talks about story talks about one individual part of it that they've discovered. And if you've ever heard this allegory, or I think it's an allegory about this idea of like, if blind men are feeling around on an elephant, they might feel a certain part and think that it's a snake, or think that it's a spear, or think that it's a giant fan, but really it's pieces of an elephant. And that's what you see. You can go to Amazon and just look around, and you'll find books on you'll be able to find books on character development, or how best-selling action stories are told, or how to structure these types of stories. But what happens is each of those just kind of describe a part of it, and it's a part of it from one person's point of view. And what happens is that they kind of get it a little wrong, right? So just like a trunk does seem like a big snake, right? The trunk of the elephant seems like a really big snake. And in a lot of ways, they're very similar. So if they describe it as a snake, they're going to be part right, but they're also going to be part wrong. Same thing, like a tusk does seem like a spear, but it's a part of a much bigger whole. And so Sean started this pursuit of wanting to build out a narrative theory that was complete and whole and worked at all levels of storytelling. All right. So while he's working on that, and really just continuing his work on that, I wrote draft two and finished draft two. Yay, I finally finished draft two. I tried to incorporate everything they told me to do. And so I showed it this time, not just to Sean, but to Danielle and Leslie as well, because, I wanted to make sure Sean wasn't crazy, and maybe he didn't like it, but it was actually good. And sure enough, Sean, Danielle, and Leslie, they threw it away. And they're like, that isn't good enough either. And so what kept happening is we were landing on this fundamental problem that I kept running into. Remember, I mentioned it a minute ago. All of my writing required extensive line-by-line editing. And so what I realized is I had a real problem here. I couldn't write compelling line-by-line writing. And so even if I, had maybe the macro elements of my story intact, the fact that I wasn't writing compelling line-by-line writing meant nobody would want to actually read it. And then at the same time, Sean had a problem too, because he needed to be able to teach me how to do this, right? And so this is where there was this moment. It was after an event we had run in Nashville, and Danielle, Leslie, Sean, and I were all sitting around a table, and Sean asked me like, hey, you've got a lot of work to do to get better. Do you want to keep going? And of course I said yes. I said, if I ever say no, just, drag me out in the street and put me down. And then Sean was kind of hoping I would say no, because that meant if I said yes, he had a lot of work to do, because figuring out how to do this is going to be really hard. And then teaching me how to do it is going to be really, really hard. And so this is where I come to these levels of writing that we talk a lot about. And so we've identified 7 levels of writing here at StoryGrid. And it's this idea of having a working way of looking and learning writing from the manuscript level all the way down to the beat level, the line by line writing, and everything in between, and making sure it all works, right? And the problem is that when Sean started in the publishing world, by the time people got their books to him, they had been writing for a long time, and their line by line writing they had picked up over years and years and years of trying. So when he developed the first the first part of StoryGrid 1.0 that came out in the book. It was really focused on these macro elements of getting the manuscript right, the quadrant right, the genre elements right, the conventions and obligatory moments right. This is all stuff, if you've been around StoryGrid, you've fallen in love with. He gave like a scientific view of how this stuff actually works. But so this is what we landed on, though, is he didn't have a way to deal with the line by line level. And this is what, really started developing out as he looked at that whole elephant of creating a full narrative theory. But the problem is nobody had done this before, right? So how asking this question of how do you write compelling sentences that hang together into a full story? And what is the difference between a well-written and poorly written sentence? Now, we all know it when we see it, but can we scientifically explain it? Can we actually have a way to look at it the same way we loved the way of looking at the macro elements of StoryGrid through the spreadsheet and the foolscap and the genre conventions and all of those things? We have to be able to do that at that beat and trope level as well. And the problem is this didn't exist. And it's funny, just this last weekend, we had some people here in Nashville going through a training, and I was talking to one of them, and he's like, Tim, I looked for it too. He's like, I went out and I was, who can teach me how to write compelling line by line writing? He's like, and I looked, and literally Sean's the only one talking about this. And so that's where we found ourselves. And so we got to work. And we just started putting in the work. And so Sean Coyne, Leslie Watts, and Danielle Kiowski started meeting every single day for hours, looking at how to do this, developing the theory, putting it into practice. And then every week they would meet with me and critique my writing and teach me for 3 hours every single Friday. And this was a really hard time. It was hard on all of us, because it was hard on me because they're trying to develop the theory and apply it to me. And so I'm trying to follow along as they're struggling just to figure out how to teach it. And at the same time, they're trying to figure out how to teach it. And so we worked, I only met once a week and they were meeting every day and developing this stuff. And along the way, looking at Masterworks, making sure that it abides by Masterworks, and trying it over and over and over. And eventually we were able to develop it into initial curriculum. And so in order for us to do this, we developed the initial curriculum, and then we had to test it. And so in fall of 2021, we launched the pilot program, and we invited a handful of people in to start going through this pilot program where we first started teaching this stuff. And it was a little chaotic there for the people that were there. I'm sure they would agree, but it went really, really well. And we just started seeing for the first time writers leveling up consistently their line by line writing. And so as we were going through this pilot program, we realized something. So at this point, we had been running the guild for almost 2 years. And along that way, we were sharing a lot of great content. We knew it was teaching writers and giving them some really helpful information, but it wasn't leveling them up the way that we wanted it to. And so we realized something as we were nearing the end of this pilot, that we had to fix the guild. There was fundamentally something wrong with the StoryGrid Guild, this membership program that we've been running for 2 years at this point. But this is scary, right? The guild is a big part of how we keep the lights on here at StoryGrid. And so the idea that we were going to just rip out everything and start over was really scary for us. We also had members that we knew loved it, and we didn't want to make them mad. But when we went back and started looking at why we did this, right? What is our definition of a guild? And how does that apply to our motto, right? I say it all the time. We help writers level up their writing. And so if we weren't doing that to the best of our ability, we're going to let everybody down, including ourselves. And that we always want to be doing the best that we can and sharing as much as we possibly can. And so we decided at the beginning of this year to make a huge change. We tore out everything from the Guild the previous 2 years and just started at first principles, focused on this idea of how can we use everything we've just learned to help writers level up their writing. And we changed the focus of the Guild to be a transformational master's level training for writers committed to leveling up their craft. And this is really what we decided to focus on all year, is make it a master's level training that we knew and we could see that writers were getting better. And so in the 2022 Guild, this is an update of what we've done this year. This is what we built. And we took that pilot program along with continued research and training that Sean had done, and Danielle and Leslie alongside of him. And we built out the 2022 Story Grid Guild. And so this year, we built a 16-week curriculum that we ran over 3 semesters throughout the year. And we focused on the necessary line-by-line skills to write engaging prose. We really focused on this idea of, like, if we can teach writers to write line-by-line engaging prose that builds to tropes, that builds to scenes, that's going to truly help our writers level up their writing. And we spent 3 semesters. In each semester, we went through a different masterwork scene and focused on that, and taught writers how to iterate on that and level up their writing skills. And we gave everybody 2 ways to engage with the material. They could self-study and do it on their own as a member of the Guild, or they could also do an editor mentorship program. And as with anything new, there were bumps along the way, but we were really thrilled with the results. It was one of those things that we weren't fully sure exactly what to expect, but it way surpassed anything that we thought was going to be possible. And it was just an amazing year. And I just love the work that we did. But of course, it really matters more, like, what did the students think? What did the people that joined the Guild actually think about this? And so when we asked them, we got tons of feedback. I'm just going to share a handful of them with you. So Amy said, the Guild has completely transformed my writing. Annette said, there is so much more value than I was expecting. Pam said, the material isn't talked about anywhere else. I already mentioned that a little bit. And then Kathy, and I know Kathy's on the call today, she said, I have learned so much from the Guild that has improved my writing. And Christy said, I always tell anyone and everyone to join the Guild. And so it's just, like I said, it's just been an amazing year. I just couldn't be happier with the transformation we've seen in our students, the transformation we've seen in the Guild, and the way people have engaged with the content. But you've only seen phase 1 so far, right? So this is the big announcement that we've been talking about. And this is the one that I'm really excited to share with you. And to actually come and share the details of it, I'm going to invite our Chief Academic Officer of Story Grid University on now, Danielle Kiowski, to share what the future of the Guild is going to look like. So Danielle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tim, and hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and to be part of StoryGrid. You know, this last year has been amazing, as I've been able to work on the Guild and work with all of you and just see all of your craft improve. It's been wonderful and rewarding. So, and to see Tim's craft improve as well as we work on the podcast and on his writing. So as Tim said, in 2022, we introduced the new Story Grid Guild. And over the course of this year, we've studied those 3 masterwork pattern scenes. So we studied a scene from The Name of the Rose, a scene from Jane Eyre, and a scene from The Aeronaut's Windlass. And along the way, we have helped hundreds of you level up your microcraft to create iterations of these 3 scenes. And it's been great. But again, as Tim said, it's just the beginning. So today, what we want to announce is that we are going to have a 3-year program that is going to really flesh out the idea of that transformational master's level program and take it from the idea of iterating masterworks and studying masterworks to giving you the program overview over the 3 years. So we want to teach you to write great scenes. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in these 3 years. So we're going to have a different character for each year that's going to contribute to how to write great scenes, to give you a micro to macro view of what you need to really level up your craft at all levels. So we're introducing the StoryGrid University core curriculum. So here I want to talk about a little bit of a metaphor for how this is working. So imagine that you want to tell a story. You don't have to imagine very hard. You want to write a story, right? So when you want to tell a story, what you need to do is to figure out how to get your message that you want to convey to your audience and how to get it from inside your heart, where it is, and out there into the world. And so when we think about signals, we can think about speaking, right? And so eventually you want to be able to tell someone what you have to say. Well, in year one, what we've been doing is that we've just been focusing on how to hear. And so we've been giving you very specific examples of what's going on in a story, telling you the answers essentially for what's going on in the story. And then your job in that year is to hear that signal. And really year one is just all about separating out the signal that we're giving you from the components that are non-essential but contribute to things like the style of the work. And then the other tier, which is the irrelevant. So this is when we look at a masterwork example and we're looking at a very set one, we're showing you what are the essential features and what are the non-essential features. And then you write your own iterations and we say, okay, these are your essential features, your non-essential features, and these are the noisy parts that are interfering with the signal. And we teach you to strip those away. That's the goal of year one. Now, as we move into year two and year three, we're going to start getting into more advanced ways of approaching story and iterating on story. So year two is the listening year. So here we're going to talk about what the global patterns of story are, and you're going to start listening for echoes of those in the things that you're reading, and you're going to start creating things that have more components of those of the macro patterns of story. And then finally in year three, you're going to start taking in all of these inputs. You're going to listen to everyone saying all of these signals that you've been reading all along, right? So this is your masterwork input. And you're going to integrate that, and you're going to be able to start speaking your own original messages. So this is a progression from really just taking things in and trying to mimic what you're hearing to putting something new out into the world. And once you have those 3 years of study under your belt, then you can go on and take the writer certification, which is part of the editor mentorship track. And this is going to be a project that will allow you to prove what you've learned. So let's take an in-depth look at each one of the years that we'll be covering in the StoryGrid University Guild. Sorry, before that, we're going to talk about the benefits. Okay, so along the way, as we do this 3-year program, as you study these 3 years and as you do your writer certification program, you're going to read widely and deeply. As we do look at the in-depth curriculum for these 3 years, you're going to see that there is a lot of reading, a lot of story, a lot of study that you're taking in. And that's going to help you to become a well-read writer. A lot of times we hear from people that they don't know what they should be reading. They don't know whether they should be just focusing on their genre or whether they should be focusing on all genres, which books are actually the ones to study, which are the ones to look at. We're going to help you do that. So we've designed the curriculum with the idea of reading widely and deeply so that you get a comprehensive view of the most important books to help you understand story as a whole. And then you're going to get targeted coaching to help you read deeply in your genre and become an expert on what you actually want to convey. This is going to help you become a well-read writer. Along the way, you're also going to learn about story from the micro to the macro and everything in between. So as we talked about on the last slide, we've been working on those micro skills, right? At the very bottom of story. In year two, we're going to go up and learn about the macro skills. And in year three, we're going to bring it back to the middle and talk about the core building blocks of story. So you're going to have a comprehensive view of that whole elephant by the time that you finish this program. And then finally, you're going to write your own stories, and you're going to do that by unlocking the lessons of Masterwork. So it really all comes back to your reading and your study. You're going to learn a process for taking apart a Masterwork, finding its core essence, and then turning it into something that is uniquely yours. But you're going to be doing it in that progressive way, where each year you're learning something a little bit different and a little bit more advanced about how to approach the problem of story. So now let's go through year by year. So year one is fundamentals. This is what we've been doing in the 2022 Guild. So we study, right now we have 3 Masterwork pattern scenes. And those are, again, from The Name of the Rose, Jane Eyre, and The Aeronaut's Windlass. And so we study one specific chapter from each of those works in each semester, and then go through how to create an iteration. So a very faithful adaptation of that scene in a new context. As I talked about when I talked about the different characterizations of the years, you're learning there to differentiate the signal from the noise. So you're learning what makes this scene a role negotiation scene, what makes this scene a lover's meet or an attack scene. And you're separating out those features from the other features that the authors included to make those scenes uniquely their own and make them work within their own story. And so then as you create your own iteration, you're playing with replacing those elements to see if you can put your own flavor onto this particular Masterwork pattern. And that brings us into the practice. This is where you're creating that really close adaptation. You're creating an iteration of a set Masterwork pattern, and that communicates a specific message to your audience. So the message there should be the same one that you're seeing in the Masterwork pattern scene. And it's just adapted for a new context, adapted for, a few things that we do to try and give some leeway in that adaptation so that you can have fun with it, make it your own. But really, it's all about creating something that is very specifically the same as the Masterwork pattern scene. So now as we move out of year one, and anyone who is new to the Guild, you'll be going through all 3 of these years. So you would start with fundamentals. So after you finish your fundamentals study, then you move into year 2 arcs. So here we really kick up the studying portion. So you're going to study 12 Masterwork level novels and films that span the StoryGrid genre blueprint classification. So you're getting into that wide study. And every semester we'll start with a film. We'll study that for a month. And then while you're studying that film, you'll be reading your first Masterwork novel. We'll study that for a month too. And then, so you're always going to be reading ahead to be looking at the next Masterwork that you'll study. And we're going to look really in depth at all of these Masterworks across the range of the StoryGrid genre blueprint to learn how to identify the global genre components in a Masterwork. So this is where you start to figure out, okay, these are the broad characteristics of this genre. These are the kinds of things that show up in the genre, and you learn how to listen for those when you're looking at the components of story. So you start to see how those global components echo down into the micro units of story. And you're going to practice creating those connections in your own iterations to start building those global arcs. And then in year 3, you're going to take what you've learned in year 1, take what you've learned in year 2, and coalesce it into really the essential building blocks of story. These are the scenes. So again, we have a high level of study. You're going to study 12 Masterwork level novels and films with the same pattern as you did in year 2. But the focus here is that you'll learn how to, on your own, distill those Masterworks down to their essence. And then you're going to take those components and make them your own. So this is about taking in all of these different inputs, figuring out all of the different ways that people communicate these signals. And then you're going to say, okay, now I want to generate a signal. This is how I'm going to do it. So you're going to practice identifying key features across a range of Masterworks, and you're going to integrate those features into your own original pattern for your scenes. So we're moving from following a recipe to creating your own recipe and then executing it on the page. And this is a very high level of study. So we talked about about the line by line execution, and we are absolutely teaching you how to do the line by line execution. But what we've learned along the way is that often a line by line problem is indicative of a problem at a higher level. Something's going on with the avatar, something's going on with the context, something's going on with the message that you want to send. And so by taking year 1, year 2, and year 3 together, you're getting that whole elephant, and it's teaching you how to figure out what your higher levels need to be in order to put the right words on the page, and then how to identify whether they're there once you've written them, of course in partnership with an editor or with your editor mentor. So once you've done those 3 years of study and you have this idea of story from the micro to the macro and everything in between, now it's time to put that into practice. And so this is the writer certification project. So if you're in the editor mentorship track, you have the ability to receive a StoryGrid writer certificate. And to do that, you'll be doing a project alongside your personal editor mentor. This is a 4-phase project in which you'll write a novella of your own. And so the 4 phases here are that you'll do narrative path planning to discover what's really important to you about writing the story and give yourself a global direction for what you want to accomplish as you're writing this novella. You'll go through skeletal scene development, where you're really putting together a roadmap for what your novella will look like. And in this phase, you're also picking your own personal masterworks and figuring out what you need to study to make your novella the best that it can be. Then you'll go into a writing phase where you'll meet regularly with your editor mentor, but they'll act in an advisory capacity to help you when you get stuck and just make sure that you're hitting your milestones and going through your project. And then you'll go into an intensive editing phase where you will work with your editor mentor to figure out what needs to change in what you've written, go through those revisions, and make sure that you come out on the other side with something that you're really proud of and something that communicates what you want to communicate. So the focus all through this is, on writing the novella. And it's also on making sure that you're writing what you want to write, that you are finding your voice as an author, that you are communicating what you want to communicate and writing the kind of stories that speak to you. So this isn't going to be a one size fits all assignment. This is really driven by you so that you're telling the stories that you want to tell and getting a taste of what it means to be the kind of author that you're going to be. And so upon successful completion of this project, you'll receive the StoryGrid Writer Certificate. And that's a brand new certification that we have to show that you've learned all of the material that we've presented along the way through the 3 years of the Guild, and that you've been able to put that into practice and create something that you're proud of and that we're signing off on as a really great example of how you can put that StoryGrid methodology into practice. So that's our vision for the 3 years of the Guild, plus that project time. And I am so excited to be able to have this comprehensive program and to have this direction for where we're going, because I think it's going to set you all up to be amazing authors in the future. And I can't wait to see what you write. So Tim, back over to you.
All right. Get my screen back up here. Right. So I'm going to go over this a little bit more and give you some more details on this and how it's going to work. But I really want to start here. So imagine that you're a woodworker and you had this idea of a beautiful ornate chair you wanted to create. And you can see in your mind all the kind of delicate pieces of it that you would put together, how you would carve it, how you would fit it together. And then you go to do it. And when you're done, it looks something like this instead. And this is the best analogy I can come up with for what it felt like to start writing fiction. Is I kept seeing in my head the kind of story I wanted to tell. And yet, when I would sit down to write, it wouldn't come out. And I could see this even when I was writing my 2 drafts of the last book that Sean ended up throwing out. And I kept just kind of landing on this thing that I can't say what I'm trying to say. And so, as I'm often called around StoryGrid, I'm the shock monkey. So I'm the one that, as Sean and then Danielle and Leslie alongside him are developing new methodology and training. I'm the first one that starts trying to put it into practice. And like I said, it was really hard. Went through it, and then if you've been listening to the podcast, even the last 6 months, you've seen me going through this process. And the I've had two big moments over the last few months that have really stood out to me. So I had these stories, these two short stories I wanted to write down that were very personal to me, very important to me. And I had not written them because I knew I didn't have the skill to get down what I was trying to say yet. And then over the summer, I sat down and I wrote them down. And I finished them both, just one draft of them, and I shipped them off to Sean, and Sean wrote back and said it was the best thing I'd ever written. No changes. Um, and then this last Friday morning, I finished a draft of what will be my next book. And what I realized after writing the draft and then going over some of it with Sean is that this draft wasn't going to get thrown away. It was actually going to get edited, which is a new thing for me lately. And so much of that is because of the kind of stuff that we're teaching you in the guild. I'm putting into practice what we're teaching you. And what I realized is that what they were doing for me is they were giving what Sean and Danielle and Leslie were doing for me, and what they do for the people in the guild is they're giving them a full set of tools and then training them on how to use it. This is the important part. When I use that analogy of the chair, the reason I can't build a chair that looks amazing is because I don't have the right tools, and then I don't know how to use those tools effectively. And so that's what we're putting into practice here with the guild, is taking you through a systematic way to add tools to your toolbox and give you the skills you need to use them so that you can actually get out of your head what you're trying to say and put it down in a way that is true. And so I want to come back to what our goal is when we're talking about the Story Grid Guild, right? It's to create a transformational master's level training for writers committed to leveling up their craft. And especially with what Danielle just showed you, I want to focus in on this master's level part, because we're going to be asking a lot of you. So for those of you that are here that have gone through the first year, you're now staring down the barrel at having to read and watch a lot and start putting the practice in. And we want you to know, like, we are dedicated to making this something that is a master's level program, a master's level training. And if you look at what's out there right now, right, so a master's of fine arts in creative writing, just the cost, like, forget about what you get taught along the way, just the cost. The average cost is 13,000 a year at a public university, or 36,000 a year at a private university. And then after seeing this, I went out to a handful of our guild members who have MFAs, and I asked them, we asked them about their time in an MFA and how it compares to their time in the guild. And this is just a little snippet of what they had to say. So Bonnie said, if you need a qualification to teach writing, then get an MFA. But if you want to become a better writer, sign up for the guild. Randall said, if you want the prestige of having a master's degree, then get an MFA. But if you want to learn how to write better, then I think StoryGrid is a better investment. Krista said, if you are really looking to write a book from soup to nuts, then you need to do the guild. And so this is what we've really focused on, is we don't really care about, if you've been around StoryGrid for a while, we're not here to have prestigious awards or certificates or whatever. Our goal is to level you up as a writer. So for those of you that aren't in the guild currently, I just want to show you in more detail what this first year of the guild looks like. So we're starting a new semester on January 1, and year 1 of the guild is going to be 3 semesters, 3 16-week-long semesters. The focus is going to learn engaging and exciting line-by-line writing that will keep readers turning the pages. This is what the whole guild program is focused on. We're going to look at those 3 individual masterwork scenes, and you're going to walk through a full StoryGrid 624 analysis of each one to have an in-depth understanding of what's happening in that scene on all 3 Trinity planes of understanding. You're going to look deep at beats, all the 3 different types of beats and how to put them into practice. And we're going to look at those building blocks of a scene, the tropes, and how they build up momentum for the readers. So how that breaks down is weeks 1 through 5 is all about that 624 analysis of the scene and planning of the masterwork scene, and then planning out what your iteration of that scene is going to look like. And then we get down deep into how to write action, and then we look at character development. And then we look at writing captivating exposition. And throughout there, you're going to write iterations of your own scene as well, so that at the end, you can see the difference between where you started and where you ended. So as I mentioned earlier, as you go through the guild training, we have 2 options on how you can engage with the training. So option 1 is the self-study option, right? So this is where every Sunday you get new recorded training delivered from Danielle Kiowski, who you just heard from, and StoryGrid publishing editor-in-chief Leslie Watts. You're going to get an assignment each week that provides a direct way to put that into practice. Again, we're assuming you're working through this. This isn't just a consumption thing where you just consume new material and hope it helps. We give you specific ways to put this into practice. We're going to give you a guide on how to work with your fellow guild members to go over the homework and provide feedback to each other each week, so you can work together to level up your writing. And then each month, Sean comes on and he's going to do some training based on his latest research and writing. And then you'll have an opportunity each month to have a Q&A with the instructors and get your questions answered for that month's training. And you have access to the StoryGrid database. And this is something we've been working on inside of StoryGrid for a while now. And we're going to have both macro and micro levels of the database, where you can look at masterworks broken down at the macro level, looking at how they work at the quadrant and genre levels. And we're also going to have a beat level training as well. That's a part of that StoryGrid database. So that's what you get as part of the self-study, is you get access to that each week and all of those benefits. Now, the second option we have available is the one-on-one editor mentorship. And basically what it is that you get all of that same stuff from the self-study, except you are paired up with an editor and they are going to mentor you through the entire process. And so you're going to start with a personalized writing plan. So this is where, before the semester meets, you're going to meet with your editor mentor. They want to hear from you about your long-term writing goals, what you're trying to accomplish with your writing, so that as they give you feedback, as you guys start working together, they can make sure they're helping you go towards your specific goals. Each week, they're going to review. So that weekly assignment that we give, they're going to actually review that and give you specific feedback on your assignment and how you did on that assignment. And then they're going to give you ways to iterate on that are specific to you. So they're going to give you feedback and tell you what to practice to continue to level up. So this is where we really believe in short feedback loops, right? This is one of the best ways to learn. And this is one of the one of the things we hate about the way writing has always been done is this idea that a writer just, sits alone for 2 years and develops a manuscript, and now you have this thing, and how do you get feedback, and where do you even start? And what if the first sentence was wrong? Now you've worked for 2 years on this thing. We've all been there. I've been there. And so this way you're getting regular feedback on your writing every single week. There's one-on-one coaching calls where you meet one-on-one with your editor. And then I think I've heard from some of the editor mentorship students this year that even what they like more than the one-on-one coaching calls is the weekly live group coaching. So this is where you meet with the instructors and other editor mentorship students each week for workshopping and training as a group. And then as Danielle mentioned, this is our certificate program. So this is where we're going to be working with you throughout the 3 years together. And then when you are a part of the editor mentorship certificate program, at the end of the 3 years is when you will do your thesis project that Danielle described. And so those are the two options. You have the self-study option, you have the one-on-one editor mentorship option. Those are the two different ways you can join the StoryGrid Guild. And just so you know what happens when you join. So if you join the StoryGrid Guild, like I said, the next semester starts January 1st. So what happens between now and then? You get access right away to the pre-semester dashboard where we have information about your membership, along with lots of training materials. So you have foundations courses in there, you have some books in there, you have some other training materials in there. We're going to provide you with a training guide of what to do to get ready so you can get the most out of the guild when it starts on the 1st. Then on December 15th, registration is going to open. So like Danielle said, there's 3 options. You're going to be able to choose which option you want to go through first. Do you want to study the Jane Eyre scene, the Aeronaut's Windlass scene, or the Name of the Rose scene? And you're going to register for the class that you'd like to be a part of. And then January 1, the first instruction is released. And if you join the editor mentorship track, you'll get to meet with your editor mentor, of course, before we start on January 1 to start there. And so I hope you can see what we're providing in this and how amazing both the instruction is from a standpoint of the self-study and the kind of practice you're going to get and in-depth understanding you're going to get. And then on this editor mentorship side, the fact that you are going to get that one-on-one constant feedback from an editor or mentor. And again, I just want to bring up what it costs to get a fine arts and creative writing master's degree at $13,000 a year at a public university, or $36,000 a year at a private university. And so when we started putting together what the guild was going to cost this year, we wanted to make sure that we were charging enough that we could provide huge amount of value. We invest a huge amount of our own money into the guild to make sure it's the absolute best it can possibly be. But we also wanted to keep it priced in a way where you can afford it. And so the 2 options for the StoryGrid Guild, we have the self-study that's available for $960 a semester or $265 a month. If you're interested in the one-on-one editor mentorship program, that is $680 a month as well, with a one-time setup fee. And so both of those are available right now at storygrid.com/guild. And so I highly recommend you go there now. And we're going to do some Q&A here in a minute, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. Danielle and I will stay on until all the questions are answered. But I recommend you go there now. There's a lot more information about what the guild is, in-depth syllabus, some FAQ there, and all of that kind of stuff. And you can go ahead and join there as well, and join us inside the guild, and go ahead and save your spot for January 1. If you are interested in the editor mentorship, we are running everybody through an application process just to make sure everybody's a good fit. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and fill out the application for that too. Both the links to join the self-study and the application for the editor mentorship is at storygrid.com/guild. So I really just, this is where we're putting a huge amount of our focus inside of StoryGrid. And again, just as I've told from my own experience, I just really hope that you consider joining us. We're going to do some really amazing work together in 2023. And as you can see, it's a 3-year program. So this isn't something where we're hoping you sign up and then you just kind of stick around forever. Like, we have a really systematic way that we want you to learn writing over the next 3 years, and we want to develop you into the skills that we think are the most important for writers to be able to do their own work. And the goal is to get you to a place where you can consistently write fiction that is getting the signal out that you want and that readers will enjoy reading. And so again, go to storygrid.com/guild. I see some of you are putting questions into the chat. Those are going to get buried pretty quick. So if you're in Zoom, you should have a little Q&A button. It has 2 little bubbles there. Just click the Q&A and put your question in there. That'll help us keep track of the questions a lot easier. So if you put it in chat, go ahead and copy and paste that over into the Q&A. That'll make everybody's life a lot easier here. So Danielle, are you ready to go ahead and start the Q&A?
Absolutely, Tim.
All right. All right. So like I said, we're happy to answer any questions you can ask about the guild, the curriculum, what we do here at StoryGrid, anything that you wish I had covered on here and I didn't cover, feel free to ask. We're pretty open here, so just ask any questions and I'm happy to answer as many as I possibly can. So, all right, first one. What happens if someone couldn't complete the 2022 program with everyone else? So again, the best, just overall, if you think of this like a university program, that's actually what I keep coming back to remind myself what we're doing. That is the best way to think about this. So just like a university, when I was going through to get my bachelor's degree, I had prerequisites, right? I had to take this class before I was allowed to take that class because they built on each other, right? So we are requiring that you do 3 semesters of the year 1 fundamentals before you move on to the year 2 training. So if you took 1 or 2 semesters throughout 2022, you're going to have to do 1 more in order to move on to year 2. And we're going to keep track of all of that for you. We're in the middle of building out a new guild system that's going to keep track of where you're at. And when you first log into that, if you're already a member, you're going to be able to see like where you are in the process and what you have to do next. But that's why we're offering all 3 of the first year semesters at the same time, so you can do the one that you missed. So that's how that's going to work. Any plans for the publishing house to continue publishing or accepting submissions? Yes. So a big reason of why we're doing the guild the way we're doing it is because of what was happening with the publishing house. And so we were accepting submissions, but we were pretty dedicated to actually looking through each submission, going through them and providing feedback. And what we were finding is they just weren't up to where we wanted them to be to publish. And keep in mind, that goes for me too, right? So my last 2 drafts got thrown away and was not accepted at StoryGrid Publishing, which I am the publisher of. So so that's why we decided to focus in on just teaching writers how to write for now. So we have plans for the publishing house in the future. We will come out with at least a couple books in 2023. The ones we've currently signed are nonfiction. But for now, the fiction side of the publishing house is on hold. And we want, so Sean and I's goal from the beginning is to publish fiction. When we decided to stop taking submissions, I was actually really upset about that. I'm still kind of upset about it, but it was the right decision. Because that's what I want to do. I want to be a part of putting out fantastic, amazing fiction into the world. And so that's definitely going to be a part of our future, but we're not exactly sure when that's going to happen. So I'll let you take this one, Danielle. Can you talk a little bit about if somebody wants to write a big idea nonfiction book, how does the guild apply to them?
I would say that anytime that you're writing anything, you can gain skills from learning about the line by lines, or you can improve by learning the skills that we're teaching in the guild. So we're teaching that line by line, how to write engaging sentences, how to make sure that your signal is coming across. And so those are things that are going to be relevant no matter what you're writing. And we've had some people say that they've taken what we've been teaching and they've applied it in articles, blog posts, things like that, and that it helps with what they're doing. That's that the guild training right now isn't specifically geared toward big idea nonfiction. And so we have a few examples in handouts and things like that from narrative nonfiction. So narrative nonfiction is a much closer fit to what we're doing just because it's so story driven. But we don't have things that specifically address big idea nonfiction at this time.
Great. We've had a couple questions from current members asking about the cost. If you are a current member, your price is not going to go up. So if you locked in a lower rate in years past, you know, um, how I see this is when we first started doing the guild 3 years ago, and then the new version this year, the people that signed up were like blindfolded and pushed into a pool. You guys were like, hey, I'm just going to trust that this is going to be worth it. I'm not really sure what this is. And so we feel like we should honor your commitment to us by keeping that price the same. We've said we would do that. So as long as you don't cancel your membership, the price is locked in and it's not going to go up for you. Let's see. So Jennifer, so I'll let you take this one. Danielle wants to know, what if you didn't do the editor mentoring in year 1, but you want to do it in year 2?
So the answer to this depends on how you adhere to the program in year 1. So if you have completed your draft iterations and really worked through the material, what you can do is in your application to be part of editor mentorship in year 2, you can submit your iterations to us, your final drafts, and we will see, we'll review them and make sure that you are at a place where you've gotten what you need to get from year 1 and you're ready to move on to year 2. In the case that you don't have that, then what we can do is that we can have you do a semester of year 1 material with an editor mentor and make sure that you get up to the place that you need to continue into year 2. And however many semesters that takes. And so we want to work with you to get you to the point where you can continue on with the program, but also want to make sure that you're set up for success. So we're not just going to throw you into the deep end, or I guess medium end of year 2, without making sure that you are up to speed to where you need to be on that year 1 material. So if you've already taken all 3 semesters, you can still retake a semester. That's not a problem. Or as I said, if you've done your iterations, then you can submit those. But we do get people who have done those semesters and then they want to come into editor mentorship and they haven't done all of the work in those previous semesters. And so what we want to make sure is that it's not just like that you've gone through, but haven't gotten what you needed to get to do what you need to do in year 2.
Yeah, so if you think about the fact that this is a master's program, and there's a thesis project at the end, like there is the possibility that you could fail and not keep going. So our goal is to get everybody through it. We feel like everybody can do it. But we also don't want to just hand out certificates just because you hung around for 3 years. So the self-study is something that you can do on your own. All the same training material is going to both. And so that's why we call it self-study. You can do it on your own. But if you're working towards the final thesis project and to become a certified StoryGrid writer, then that's going to involve making sure that you're hitting the marks that you need to mark throughout the program. Yeah, and we have, so just to be clear, if you've been paying attention at all, if you've been paying attention and you're not a current member, we have raised the price significantly. And it's because the program's worth it. And we want to make sure that we're able to continue to invest as much into the program as we think it's worth. We're going to keep adding to it and making it, I already believe it's the best writing program that's available by 10x, I don't know, some astronomical number. And we're just going to keep making it better. And so we had this pricing in mind early on, and we wanted to give people, again, give people a chance to get in while you know, while we were still building it up. And now that we've got it locked in and secured, this is the pricing that we're planning on running with. All right. Yeah, if you're putting your questions in the chat, I can't keep up with them. They're just kind of running by. So drop them into the Q&A portion. And again, in your Zoom controls, there's a chat option and a Q&A sec option. Just drop them in there. I just don't want to miss your question, and I can't really keep track of the chat while we're answering questions. Let's see. So how long is the full program? The structure looks like 3 years, but when you laid it out, year one was only 16 weeks. Yeah. So it's each year is 3 semesters. Each of those semesters is 16 weeks. So it's 9 semesters. So if for instance, you have to take a semester off, you would just take longer to get through it all, but you would have to go through all 9 semesters. And before you ask, if you've locked in your pricing and you need to take a semester off, you can put your account on hold for 1 semester and maintain your pricing. So if you have to take a semester off, you can email us and let us know. We'll put your account on hold and you can come back the next semester. So I have completed 2 semesters of year one. When would I get to enter year 2? So this first semester that starts January 1st, you would complete your 3rd semester of the year 1 fundamentals, and then starting in the May semester, you would start the year 2 training. That's how it would work. So again, think of it as prerequisites. You've just like when I was in college, you know, I had to take 2 semesters of calculus before I was allowed to take calculus-based physics, which I don't recommend doing, but you know, I had to do it for my major. So that took me 4 semesters to get through, and I had to take those in order. So it's the same idea. Let's see. All right, I'll let you take this one, Danielle. Does the program work with screenplays?
All right. So I want to take this opportunity to talk about how the guild relates to your work in progress. And what we're asking you to do is to put your work in progress on hold for the duration. You can, when you feel ready, you can start applying the skills that you're learning to your work in progress. So it's not, I'm not saying you're not going to work on anything for 4 years, right? But what I am saying is that the guild is not the place to work on your work in progress. So what we have found is that if we have a student who comes into the guild and they attempt to work on their work in progress directly in the guild, it ends up as a disaster, because what happens is that it doesn't fit exactly correctly. So you're spending the mental energy that you need to spend on learning these skills, learning how to apply them. Instead, you're spending all of that energy trying to fit one to the other. And honestly, what happens is that people are so attached to their works in progress because, I mean, that's your baby, right? And so instead of what you're doing is you take the skill and you try to twist that to work in your work in progress. And that just doesn't work. So like in the example with building the chair that Tim was talking about, you end up with a twisty Allen wrench. Nobody can use that. So what you want to do is come into the guild and work on the skills that you need to write everything better from then on. That said, if you come into the editor mentorship track and you say, I'm focusing on screenplays, what we can do is that we can work with you to make sure that we are tailoring how you create your iterations and how you go through the material to best support your study that's going to support your screenplays in the future. Because again, all of this is working on the fundamental principles of story, working on what you need to create effective sentences and engaging content in any forum. And so a lot of these skills are going to apply, and we can help you tailor that content. So I've had a couple of people go into editor mentorship who in their works in progress, they work on graphic novels. And so we've worked together to look at how the curriculum applies and try to talk about how you would take those skills and apply them in that other medium, but working within the constraints set up by the Guild semester. So especially in kind of tricky situations like that, that's where I would say that working one-on-one with an editor mentor is going to be extremely valuable for you, because they're going to help you prioritize which skills are important and help you map what you're learning onto how you can take that away and start working on your own focus, whether that's a different medium or whatever. But for the duration of the Guild, it is very important that as you go into the work of the semester, that you are all in on trying to apply the lessons faithfully to the exercises.
I understand some of you put these questions in before I already answered them from somebody else, but just to reiterate, see, if you joined the Guild this past semester, will you spend the first 2 semesters of 2023 completing year 1 training? Yes, you will. Let's see. What time of day do you offer the live learning opportunities? Lately we've been doing them Wednesdays, I think 11 or a.m. or noon Eastern. Those are subject to change. The editor mentorship workshops are done at different times. I think some are in the evenings, right, Danielle?
Yeah. So as we go on with editor mentorship, we're going to start having even more, because we're going to have different groups for year 1, year 2, and so on to the future. And so what we try to do there is that we'll have one evening option and one daytime option to try and fit as many schedules as possible. And then, if we find out that the group needs something different, they're pretty small groups, then we can work through that and find other ways to accommodate. But and the editor mentor one-on-one meetings are at your schedule. So we have different editor mentors. Rachel and I are the editor mentors right now, and we're in different time zones. And so part of how we decide who gets what student to work with is based on time zone availability. So, we really try and make sure that it works with your schedule, and we're pretty flexible, and we'll work with you to make sure that you find a time that works for you. Because that one-on-one time, when you're meeting with us one-on-one, that's when it really, really needs to be live. And then hopefully, we can find a group workshop time that works for you. If there's a group event, like any of the trainings with Sean, any of the instructor Q&As with us, anything like that, you can always submit something ahead of time and then watch the recording. So it's, I understand it, like the best thing to do is to be there live, right? But also, if you can't make it for whatever reason, we try to accommodate and try to make sure that we're including everyone, and that you're not getting your question excluded just because you can't be there live. We really want to make sure that we're hearing from everyone and that we're supporting everyone in the ways that we really can.
Great. Steve asked, if we joined or renewed the Guild partway through the year, how does sign up work? You don't have to sign up. So this is an expansion of what we're already offering. So if you're already in the Guild, you're already going to be a part of this, and we're going to go ahead and move you through to the next semester. So when registration opens, if you've already done all 3 semesters of year 1, you'll have one option, which is to sign up for the first semester of year 2. If you still have a semester left in year one, then you'll register for that. Okay. I'll let you take this one, Danielle. How do I know that my editor will have deep knowledge in my personal genre? How do you determine fit between author and editor mentor?
Great. So I would say that one of the things that we do is we have this application. We review the application. We try to make matches between the student and the editor mentor, or sorry, yes, the student and the editor mentor, in ways that support the goals that the student has shown in the application. Now, in terms of the deep knowledge of the genre, the focus for the first 3 years is on that guild material. And so when I am vetting and training editor mentors, what I want to do is make sure that they can give you stellar feedback on your performance in the guild material. And it's about building that relationship. So they're going through and they are trusted to give you feedback on the broad study that we're doing in the guild. So again, we're starting out studying widely, right? We're studying foundations. And that means that they're going to be working across all genres. They have a deep knowledge of story in general. And more specifically, they have specific training for how to give you feedback on the masterworks and the masterwork iterations that we're working with in the guild. So this is very targeted. I trust my editor mentors. I do spot check, I do quality check and all of that, but I trust them to be giving the level of feedback that I would give myself. And it's just the student experience is really the most important thing to me. And so that quality is always going to be there. That's something that is critical to our program, is making sure that the feedback is exceptional. Now, when it comes to the deep knowledge of your individual genre, I would say this is my feeling as someone who is an editor mentor, that this is why you want to be in editor mentorship all 3 years into the project. Because I saw a question, can I do self-study for the first 3 years and then just do editor mentorship for my project? And I think that what you'll find is that the more time you can spend in editor mentorship, the deeper the relationship you will cultivate with your editor mentor, and the better they'll be able to support you as you go throughout your work. And that means helping you tell the kind of story that you want to tell. This is a very personal process where you're telling a story that means a lot to you as a human being. And so the better that I know you as a human being, the more I can support that. What that means in terms of genre is that maybe you love, I don't know, whatever it is when we start out, maybe you love a really specific niche thing. Let's pick something that's, fairly popular. Maybe you love like noir crime. Maybe I don't know a lot about noir crime, but as your editor mentor, I'm going to start learning more about that genre along the way because I want to support you. And so this is really a two-way street where it's not just you're learning from your editor mentor, but they're also working to support you the best that they can. And so then by the time that you're doing your project, I'm probably going to know a lot about your specific subgenre because I've been working with you and talking to you about it and studying it for the last 3 years. And so really, the more that you can cultivate that relationship, it is that two-way street where you're both growing your knowledge bases so that you can work together.
Great. So there's been a few more questions about nonfiction memoir. Again, these may have come in before Danielle answered that. So I'll just answer it from my point of view. So we are focused here on narrative. So if you're trying to write like just a straightforward how-to book or a book like the For Dummies series or something, this is not for you. However, what we found is the narrative portion. So memoir would definitely be in there. And again, a narrative nonfiction. I'm just going to speak from my own experience. It's leveled up all of my writing. So anytime I sit down to write something, so my process is I always have a book I'm ready to work on as soon as I'm done with a draft. Because I never want to just let something go. So I told you Friday, I finished the draft of my next fiction novel. So Saturday morning, I started one that is going to be a narrative nonfiction. And I'm just better. I'm just so much better. The kind of way that we teach to valence your language, to focus on who you're writing for, who you are as a writer. I mean, just everything plays into all of it. So you have to understand that we're studying fiction. And so we showed you the three books that we're going to study the first year. So I don't want to like talk you into something that, it is based on fiction. We're looking at fiction. But it's 100% going to help your narrative writing in whatever way that you're putting that into practice. And I'm going to touch too on we are not going to allow people that went through 3 years of self-study to do the thesis project. We actually are cutting it at year 1. So you'll be able to self-study year 1. And then like Danielle explained, as long as your work is up to where we need it to be, you'll be able to join there. But that would be a disaster if we tried to do that, because you would basically be coming in and we would be assuming where your level is. And if you're not there, it's just not going to work. And so, I mean, it's the same way where like you can't like read some books and then go get your PhD by just doing the thesis project, right? Like you have to go through the process. And so, yeah, so that's how we're running it. Let's see. Yeah, so let me come back up here. Where did it go? Have you considered doing a version of the guild site where writers can give each other feedback and access forums without committing to the whole guild training, perhaps available to people with at least 1 semester of training? It would be able to great to participate in some form, but not sure if the time commitment will work. We are not going to do that. So, one of the things that we believe here at StoryGrid is like where you put your attention is a moral act. And so when we have been looking forward into 2023, we're putting a humongous amount of our attention on the guild, and we're going to focus on that so that they have the best experience. All of our members and students have the best experience possible, and it keeps getting better over time. And so anything else that we do outside of that, we're going to be extremely selective. And we want to make it the best possible. So we understand that means we can't, there's some people that just can't do it. We totally understand that. But that's what we're going to be doing with our time and effort. Are you doing any kind of professional marketing of the certificate so it has credibility within the industry? Not at this time. So we want you to pursue this because you want to pursue it, because one of my goals in life, this came up on the podcast a couple months ago when we were talking about whether we should keep doing the podcast the way we were doing it. And I've had some friends who wanted to be writers, started businesses in the writing world, and then haven't written anything. And if that happened to me, I would think none of it was worth it. And my goal, I always say, is I want the best thing that I've ever written to be the last thing I write. And so here at StoryGrid, we pursue the craft of writing because it is worth pursuing. Now, we believe a lot of the ancillary things will come: publishing, selling books, writing books that people will love to read and tell their friends and buy copy. We have a publishing house that needs to make money. We want all of those things, but our core goal is to level up our craft as writers because that is worth doing. Um, so we believe that our credibility will grow in the industry as we produce amazing writers. That's the best marketing that we can do. We don't want to go out and try to convince people that we're producing great writers. We just want to produce great writers. And so that's what we're going to focus on. So if you do not take this program, if you think that because having a certificate will like get you an agent or something, like that is not why you should. It's way too hard. There's easier ways to get an agent. And so yeah, we're not going to focus on that at all. Again, we have a singular focus. It is to level up your craft as a writer. And so any questions about if we're going to be doing something other than that, the answer is no. Yeah, well, the monthly cost of the one-on-one track stay the same for 3 years. Yeah, so the same thing. Whenever you sign up, that locks you in. So we're not going to raise the price on you throughout the 3-year program. That would be a really asshole thing to do, is to let you get 2 years in and then double the price or something. So whatever price you sign up for, whether it's a self-study or editor mentorship, that price stays locked in through the entire 3-year program. We're not going to raise that price on you in the future. Yeah, so Danielle touched on this, but I'm going to mention this too. So Gwen asked, if you're already working on a novel, would you be able to use that work as part of the program? We recommend that you don't. And I'm going to speak to this from personal experience. When I'm writing something that I hope is something that I will finish and publish, I'm attached to it emotionally. And so when it's a lot harder for me to throw it away, to do a full rewrite, to have it torn to shreds by my editor. And again, I've talked about this on the podcast a little bit. Like, this is why we do it this way, because I'm not emotionally attached to the writing, and I'm doing it to develop skills. Like, that's what I really, really, really want you to see this, that when you're in the guild, we're going to develop your skill set. And then you will have that skill set, and you'll keep getting better, of course, but you'll have that new skill set for the rest of your life, for everything that you write in the future. Like, go back to the analogy of the woodworking. Like, imagine if you got to spend 3 years with a master woodworker showing you how to use the tools and building up your skill set. For the rest of your life, you would be a world-class woodworker. It's like, years ago, I think it was like 8 years ago, I decided to switch from QWERTY keyboard layout to what's called Colmac, and it was really painful. And now I type faster for the rest of my life, right? So I really want you to take your focus off of whatever work in progress you're currently on and think about what it means for all your future works in progress to level up your skill set, right? So, yeah, so I think I probably answered that enough. Can you please go over the cost? Yeah, they're all on storygrid.com/guild. Again, it's you can pay monthly or semesterly. So the semester cost for one self-study semester is $960, and then the cost for the editor mentorship is $680 a month. All right. Can I retake a semester? Yes, you can retake a semester. see. Considering the new depth of analysis involved, is there any room for graphic storytelling models, or are we sticking exclusively to written text submissions to avoid distractions? We're sticking to written text for now. You know, we have plans in the future to do more things, but for now, that's what we're sticking to. Lenny says, are guild cohorts continuing? The cohorts are going, the way we're going to organize group study is going to change significantly at the first of the year. We'll talk about that more as we get a little bit closer, and we're doing a Q&A next week just for guild members. So if you have any questions, you'll be able to get those answered there as well, and that's in your dashboard. You can do all 3 years as self-study. So think about, like, if you go to a university and you're able to audit the classes, so you can sit in the room and go through the material, but you don't take the test, you don't get your stuff graded, and you don't get the degree at the end. That's the self-study. So you're able to go through all of the training for all 3 years and do it on your own and work in a group of other people doing it on their own. That's going to be available to you. Danielle, I'll let you take this one. Who are the editor mentors?
Right now, it is me and Rachel Arsenault. And so we split the editor mentorship students between us. And as we grow the program, if we have more students who would like to work with editor mentors, we will be training other StoryGrid certified editors to take on that role. But right now, it's just the two of us working on the program. The StoryGrid editor mentors come out of StoryGrid certified editors. So these are people who have a background in the StoryGrid methodology. And then on top of that, they have specific training to be able to give feedback and work with the guild materials specifically.
All right, this one's from Marilyn. Are you starting a year 2 program this coming January? For those of us that have gone through the guild self-study this first year. Yes. So, and it'll be the same thing where the year 2 training will start January 1. If you're going through self-study, you'll get those first lessons on January 1. If you're going through editor mentorship, you'll also get those first lessons on January 1. You'll just work with your editor through it. So it's going, if you're in the guild already, it's going to keep working exactly the same. Your training is going to progress to year 2, starting January 1st, if you've gone through those first 3 semesters. Yeah, we've had a couple questions. If you're on month to month and you want to switch to annual, just email support@storygrid.com and we'll have to follow up with you on that. I'll let you take this one, Danielle. Please define narrative nonfiction and big idea nonfiction.
Narrative nonfiction is really story driven. So this is something like a memoir. This is something like a factual story where it looks like fiction, but it's based in fact. A big idea nonfiction takes all of the 4 modes of nonfiction storytelling. So that's academic, how to, narrative nonfiction, and the other mode. If you've taken What's the Big Idea, that's where we go over all of the nonfiction principles. And so this is really where you take all of those. Oh, sorry, the big idea is the 4th that it goes to. Anyway, so all of those modes come together in Big Idea to create this experience where you're walking through with an author protagonist, and you are learning alongside of them how they came to understand the big idea. So that just has a lot more going on. So a lot of components that all come together to create the whole experience. One of which is narrative nonfiction, is that story component. So when you take the guild material, you can level up that story component. And, as you've talked about, Tim, even when you're writing nonfiction, and you're writing something that's maybe not entirely story based, you're still learning these skills. So it's still applicable. It's just not directly applicable in the same way that it would be to something that is more narrative focused, like memoir.
All right, so there's a couple questions about the writing certificate. So what we want you to see this as is it means you accomplished something. And if you're hoping, so somebody asked, like, will the certificate, can they use like the certificate to add to their ghostwriting resume? Sure. You'll have the certificate. You can use it however you want. And you'll have to probably explain to them what you had to do to get the certificate, which will be very impressive. But the certificate is not going to like magically do anything for you. We're basically, what we want to do is create something where we basically say you have gone through the training and gone through the hardship of going through the training and develop something that we certify as worthy. And if that matters to you, then this program's perfect. But it's, you know, if you take away the fact that an MFA in creative writing can get you a job that probably pays half of what you paid to get the certificate, but what's the reason for that? Like, it's so that you could get through it. And that's what we want you to see this as, is like we've created an extensive program that's going to be hard to get through, and it's going to be a meaningful accomplishment to get through it. And so we want to certify that you have finished that meaningful accomplishment. Yes, year 2 will be broken into 16-week blocks as well. So all of our semesters, all of the core semesters we're going to run as 16-week semesters. So and each year there'll be 3 of them. So it'll be on that cycle. If you're interested in, so if you're a current guild member and you're interested in doing the editor mentorship, just understand the pricing has been the same the whole time, that we have not raised that pricing at all. And we've done that on purpose, of like, we want that to be something that people, if at all, can be a part of, they would be a part of it. And so that pricing is staying the same. Yes, so Beth says, if we have to go on hold for a semester, will the next semester we need be available then, or will we have to wait a whole year? Yes, it will be available then. So again, using year 1 as an example, we've done 3 semesters, and all 3 of those are going to be available in semester 1 of 2023. So you'll be able to pick either the one that you need to take because you missed it, or if you're starting for the first time, you'll get to choose which one you want to start with. Yeah, and just to be clear, whether you started semester 1, 2, or 3 in 2022, you are in this new 3-year program. You've already took part of the first year. You didn't even know it was a 3-year program. So what, you know, obviously we think writing is a lifelong pursuit that you will never perfect, right? You'll never be done learning about writing. But there is a certain set of skills that we think a writer needs to have in order to write at a high level. That's what we're teaching in this 3-year program. So so again, just think about it as a university level program. That's a 3-year program. It consists of 9 semesters. You have to go through all 9 semesters. If you've already gone through 1, 2, or 3 of the semesters, you're already have gotten started on that 3-year track. Marnie says, do you still offer training for editors? And if so, how will this new content affect that program? So we've decided to sunset the current way that we've done the editor certification. And we're actually going to use it. We're going to recreate it. And but we're not quite ready to talk about that yet. So we will make an announcement sometime in the future about what we're doing for the editor certification training. But this training that we're talking about is focused on writers, on writing, not on the editing side. This is for writers. Danielle, I'll let you take this one. What do you anticipate the time commitment for years 2 and 3 compared to year 1?
We'd like to keep them about the same. And so, as we develop the material, we'll see how long the training videos need to be and things like that. But the total time commitment should be comparable for years 1, 2, and 3.
Sandra says, is there a place to go to read the details about year 2? So we are going to release those details in the coming weeks for the year 2 training to the current guild members, because they're the only ones it's really going to affect for now. If you're not currently a guild member, you've seen the in-depth syllabus for what year 1 looks like, and that's on the guild page as well. That's on your screen. But yeah, we will, if you've gone through the first 3 semesters, we are sure that you are excited and anticipating what we're going to do in the first semester of year 2. Trust me, I am just as excited and anticipating it. And so we will announce that and let you know soon. So the writer's cert in the 4 years is only available if you work through with a one-on-one mentor. Yeah, the only thing you can test out of would be year 1. Um, and then you could move into the editor track, but then it gets so in depth. We want to make sure you're working with your editor through those final 2 years before you get to the thesis project. So yeah, if you go through all of year 2 training as self-study, you're not going to be able to jump into the editor mentorship for year 3. Again, I know that some of these questions I'm just now, like this one was asked 30 minutes ago. So is there a self-study option for year 2 and 3 as well as year 1? Yes, everything will be self-study. Even the thesis project, we're going to release our plan of how we're doing the thesis project, and you can do it on your own. You won't, be working with an editor and making sure it's all correct as you go through it. But we want this to be available to people. And so we're going to, all of the training will be released for self-study as well. Yeah, if you're a current member and you want to switch to the certificate track, go and fill out the application. That would be the best way to get started. So just go to storygrid.com/guild, scroll down and fill out the application. That's the best way to let us know that you're interested. And then we'll look at your application. If you're a good fit, we'll take care of getting you switched over. I think I'm actually going to skip to the end and start answering new questions because so many of these we've answered recently. Um, Christine says, if you plan to only do self-study, must you take all 3 semesters of the first year, or can you jump ahead? You have to take all 3 years, 3 semesters of the first year. So the prerequisites are going to apply whether you're self-study or editor mentorship. So again, we're going to keep track of where you're at. So each semester when it's time to register, we'll show you the next class that you should register for. No, again, just so you know, if you're already a member of the guild, you literally don't have to do anything. You don't have to, we're not raising your price. You don't have to do anything special. All you have to do is on December 15th, we'll open up registration and you'll go and pick whatever class you want to do next semester. But if you're a member, you're in, you don't have to pay more. You don't have to sign up for anything. Just don't cancel your membership and you're automatically in. Did I hear correctly that the Novilla project will be available for those who choose to self-study as well? We just won't get feedback. Yeah, we'll basically just release the process we're going to take people through. And then, you can look at that and try to do it. All 300. Okay, yeah, I don't know what that means. Answered that. So Tony says, is it feasible to do this coursework and continue separately to do work on my current novel? So, so it depends on your situation. So like my wife a few years ago went to get her master's, and I think it was a 3-year program, and she went through everything, and some semesters were busier than others, and it just depends on where she was in life of what else she could do. So in the FAQ, we put about the time commitment, the rough time commitment that you can expect to have. If you want to work on something else separately, I hope this doesn't come across as like jerky, but like we trust that we're all adults here. And so you can do whatever you want. So what we recommend is that you don't bring your work in progress into the program, that you just start fresh in the program again, focus on skill development. But if you want to work on a work in progress on your own on the side, like go for it. Like do whatever you want, so yeah, I don't know. It just depends on how much time you have and how much you can dedicate to your writing work. So, yeah, there's been times as, again, I'm going through this in a kind of a different way, but I'm going through the same material you are with Sean, Leslie, and Danielle. And it just depends on how busy I am, how much work I get done on any other writing projects that I want to work on. So Steven says, you mentioned for new members, they will get some pre-semester 1 materials. For those of us going into year 2, will we get the same? So you already have access to those. So the foundations courses, the books, those are already in there. We will let you know ahead of time what movie you need to watch and look at before we start year 2 training. So you have to remember we're November 9th. The semester starts January 1. And so if you're already in the guild, you're going to hear from us just like normal, saying like, hey, here's what's coming the first of the year. Here's what the next semester is going to look like. Here's what you need to do to prepare for that. So we'll continue to communicate with you and make sure you know everything that's going on.
I also just wanted to say about the list of things coming for year 2, that we don't want you to get the list of 12 novels and films and just knock them out right now, because what's going to be really important is that you're going to learn skills for taking in story along the way as well. So as Tim said, we will give you the film to watch, or we'll give you the the information for what film to watch before we hit the first of the year. But then also, as we progress through, we'll study the film and then we'll say, okay, as you're reading this next masterwork, this is what we want you to look for. This is what we want you to concentrate on. So, so your study and your reading and your watching, those are going to level up just as much as your writing skills are going to level up. So we want to not try to do everything right at the beginning.
After we complete the 3 years, will we continue paying uh that same amount? No, we're done with the 3-year program. So we have talked about having some sort of alumni program that will include ongoing training. But right now, the first people to get through all 3 years of the training won't get through it until the end of December 2024, right? Because it's 3 years. So we're not too worried about that right now. Again, we're highly, highly focused on just making sure we offer the best writing training available on the planet right now in this program. So, but no, we're not just going to keep trying to charge you. It's a 3-year program. And there's been a couple questions too about like the final thesis project and all of that. So you see it as 2 tracks. There's the self-study track where you're doing it on your own and or with a couple peers in the program. And then there's the editor track where you're doing it with an editor mentor. At the end of both tracks, you can try to write something new. On the editor mentor track, we're going to run it as a thesis project, which will then graduate you from the certificate program. So if you're thinking that means we're forcing you to do the editor mentorship, I mean, we kind of are to do the thesis project because just like, again, like I can't get a master's degree just because I read the books and the required material. Like I actually have to go through and do all of the work. And so this is the exact same way.
Yeah. And I think also just talking about the project, you know, I think what you said about it being 2 different tracks and then it's showing what you've learned is absolutely true because the certificate is really in the certificate project, that's really a culmination of everything that you've done in that track, including, as I was talking about before, the rapport and the relationship that you've built up with your editor mentor. And so I really want to stress too that the certificate project, I think, when you're going through that, while we'll make the process available, I do think that the having an editor mentor to guide you through that process is going to be critical to that project. So, I think I just want to underline how much of a difference it makes to get that feedback, to get that guidance, and really to learn the additional skills. I think this is something that some of our editor mentorship students have said, so I want to touch on this, is that you're not only getting feedback and getting that sort of product of the knowing what you need to do next, but you're also building up the skill of working with an editor and working with an editor as a partner who helps you to create the kinds of stories that you want to create. And so, so working with an editor mentor is not just getting graded papers and things like that, but it's actually getting a whole additional skill set. And I think that's really important. And the what you were talking about, Tim, with the metaphor of the master's program, that you can't just read the books and do the assignments and then at the end get your degree. It's also because being in that classroom, interacting with the other students, interacting with the professor, like all of that, that's an additional skill set. And this is the same way, where it really is a very different experience to go through that editor mentorship track.
Yes, so if you're a current member, as we update you on the changes coming at the first of the year for year 2, we'll address how the cohorts are going to change, as well at that time. Okay, I think I got through, I think we got through. Did you see any, Danielle, that we need to address? And if you feel like we didn't address your question, now's the time to drop it in because we had a lot of doubling and tripling up of questions. So I think I tried to address everything. But if I missed yours and you're still here and you want me to answer it, go ahead and drop it in. Danielle, I'll give this one to you. Will year 2 include material from the Architecture of a Masterwork lecture series Sean is currently leading?
So the architecture of the masterwork class represents a change and a refinement in the way that StoryGrid looks at genre. So if you are taking that course, what you're seeing is really just a fundamental shift. And it's not that anything that came before is wrong. So when we look at the 5-leaf genre clover, when we look at the primary and secondary genres, that is still absolutely applicable, right? But it is a leveling up of our understanding of genre to include the concepts of governing and generating genres, to include connections between these genres. It's very, very deep. This is not just it's not just an add-on, right? This is fundamental. And I say that because what that means is that everything that we do in StoryGrid after the Architecture of a Masterwork lecture series is going to be influenced by the Architecture of the Masterwork lecture series. This is very important work that represents really a change moment in how we view genre at StoryGrid. So in that sense, everything that we do in the guild is going to be impacted by those new concepts and that new way of looking at genre. Absolutely. However, it is not going to be a repeat of that material. So if you think about, if you've taken any of the other seminars that we've done in the past, and then you've taken the guild, what you see is that the underlying concepts are the same, right? Because it's story, we're all looking at the same elephant. We're all touching that same elephant. But the way that we are approaching it is different, because in the guilds, as I said on that slide with the Lego blocks, we want to help you write great scenes. And now we have this 3-year vision. We want to help you write a great novella. And so everything that we do in the guild is from the viewpoint of how do I help you to get words, to get good words on paper, or to build up that toolkit, everything, whatever phase you're at, all of it is moving toward generation. And so as you know, if you've gone through any of our training, we care so much about Sam, that single audience member. We care that we're doing what we can for you. And so the Sam in the guild is someone who is trying to get words on paper. And that's why it looks different, even though it has the same conceptual underpinnings. It looks different from a seminar that is about analysis and about applying our concepts to a specific masterwork. Not that you can't apply that, of course you can, but it's not as on the ground in terms of giving you the targeted exercises and worksheets and things like that. In the same way, when we teach to editors, it looks completely different. And so all of these different components of our ecosystem absolutely work on the same concepts, but they do look very, very different because we have different goals for them. And so I know that, if you're in the lecture series, you're in the lecture series. And so this isn't like a sales push or anything, but I do want to say this is such an important moment for StoryGrid, this lecture series. I am just so excited to have this new view of genre, and it really is going to be fundamental in the way that we see things.
All right. Is a new edition of the book with the new info Sean and team have been creating. I want to say, I mean, the real answer is yes, but I don't recommend holding your breath in anticipation. Books take a really long time to generate, as we all know. Um, so we do plan on releasing books in the future about our methodology, but I can tell you we don't even have first drafts of them at this point. Um, can you sign up for the guild in 4 months if you can't start now? Yeah, so you'll be able to so we run on this 16-week cycle. And so every 16 weeks we open up registration. So this is a little different because we do it in November. Um, but we'll open up registration in April for the semester that starts in May, in August for the semester that starts in September. You will we be studying screenplay scripts or watching the actual films in years 2 and 3? I'll let you take that one, Danielle.
Watching the actual films. So then we may go back and, review the actual words that were used and things like that. But the initial experience of the story will be watching the actual film.
All right. I think we got through all the questions. Um, all right, so we'll end it here right at 2 hours. So I really appreciate all of you being here, especially for those of you that have stayed on for this whole thing. Um, you know, I love Story Grid, and um I came to it as a fan, right? I read the book and I knew there was something special here. And what I love about, working with Sean now for 7.5 years is I'm still a fan. I'm still a fanboy. And so the ability to put this out and be a part of it, and then to work alongside not just Sean, but Danielle Kiowski and Leslie Watts, as they add to the content and add to the training, it just means a lot. And I when I talk about Story Grid and the work we're doing, I always say it's going to take me roughly 200 years to get it all done. So I gotta get going here. But what we're doing in the guild is really, really special. If you've looked around at what's available to learn how to write, there's just nothing like this. And there's nothing like this that'll show clear, marked improvement, um, that you can test against, and that we do. And so I'm just so thankful that I get to be a part of this. I'm so thankful that I get to work with Danielle and Leslie and Sean through all of this. And I'm thankful for all of you for being a part of our community as well. So thank you for being here. Danielle, thanks for sharing. And we're looking forward to starting the guild on January 1. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.